Okay, here we again with the third roundtable. You see, eccolo qua. We see the one of our panelists. In this roundtable, we focus some important topics around the implication of digital transformation, especially digital ethics, social and cultural impact. It's very important. We saw this morning in the uncertain world, in changing world we are living today, that it's very important to have hard skill and soft skill and to understand the impact of technology on our future, on our social environment, on our economics impact, on our government and politics, of course. And we understood that the creativity and the link between our skill and soft skill is the main pathway we have to go on. So in this panel we have, you see linked in a virtual mode, Simone Arcagni, Associate Professor, Università degli Studi di Palermo. Welcome, Mr. Arcagni. And in our physical stage, we have Fabio Fossa, postdoctoral research, Department of Mechanical Engineering of Politecnico di Milano, and Pawel Pokutycki. It's right, the right pronunciation of the surname, I'm satisfied. Interaction designer, lecturer and researcher at the Royal Academy of Art in Netherlands. So we have three different competencies, different skills, different point of view, different mindset to understand your specific point of view on this topic. So I'd like to start with the ice-breaking question with you, Mr. Professor Arcagni. This morning, during the different interviews with our panelists in the first and the second roundtable, we have understood that, as mentioned, to gain opportunities and to face on the new challenges in the uncertain worlds, it's important to understand the evolution of emerging technologies, and that's requires also hard skills, technical skills, and creativity, curiosity, and other soft skills. In your opinion, what kind of skills are important to face on the challenges around ethical, social, and cultural impact of emerging technologies?
Thank you. First of all, sorry, because I'm a little sick with a little fever, so I can't took the train. I couldn't take the train to go with you. I'm so sorry. And let me start with my point of view. That is, I make an anticipation. The philosophy is the real approach to know better technology. But before that, just a brief introduction. In 1836, the American writer, Edgar Allan Poe, published a tale called Metzel's Chess Player, about a mysterious machine, an Baroque automa called the Turkish because its shape, that played chess. Poe investigated as a writer, as a journalist, about this machine and discovered it was a fake. Inside the automa, there was a tiny man who managed the machine. What's the moral of this story? Apart from that the human being is always a forger, but this is another story. The real moral, in my opinion, is that inside every machine lives a man. Technology is not a foreign and unknown object far from us. We are technology. We always look at technology as a UFO, you know, the identified flying object, like an American 50s B-series movie, a UFO that comes to Earth and does something, normally something dangerous for us. In my opinion, that is a fake, and this is a mistake. According to French philosopher Bernard Stiegler, in my opinion, technology is our apparatus or dispositives to see, observe, study, know the world. Language is technology. It is a cognitive process we use to shape and inhabit the world. Just like act of thinking, we feed technology, we expand and augment technology. And the results are a series of dispositives that are cognitive and sensorial apparatus. During the industrial revolutions, the first with the power of the steam and the second one with the power of electricity, we focused our attention on instruments, like something in front of us. I think the theories of Oswald Spengler, Ernst Jung, Marx and Engels, when they talk about the figure of the worker and the machine, two distant things. But with the digital revolution, we realized that we are technology. Something has changed. The allegories, for example. Norbert Wiener called cybernetic the information among human beings, animals, and machines, creating a connection between biology and technology. John von Neumann, one of the fathers of modern computer, described the computer as a brain. Alan Turing talked about intelligence. Stefan Wolfram, after studying cellular automas, theorized a digital philosophy as a part of biology. Kevin Kelly defined technium, a space sited in the middle between human and instrument. What do I want to point out? Sociology, anthropology, ethnography, narratology, phenomenology, ontology, ethics, for example, we can consider all of them the most interesting approach to understand technology. Obviously, assuming a deep study of the Politecnico assumption and practices. But philosophy is the best approach to know what technologies are, because technology is something inside. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Arcagni, and Pawel, Fabio, I see you smile during this speech of Professor Arcagni. So in the machine, inside the machine, there are humans, and we are technologies. This is the key point of the speech of Professor Arcagni. And the philosophy, the sociology, the anthropology, the storytelling are topics very important for the evolution of the technology. So which is your opinion, why it is so important to create a link between these different topics? Fabio, you are a philosopher and you are training to the engineer. So what does it mean for you?
Well, thank you for the question. You see, this morning we've been talking about creating a link between these two dimensions, philosophy, ethics on the one side and technology on the other. And I'm not sure that this is the best way to frame our problem. I mean, the connection is there. We don't need to create the link. We need to become aware of the fact that there is this connection, which is there. So there is nothing, this is not something that we are forcing to the situation that we are analyzing. It's there, the connection. We need to acknowledge it, and we need to find a way to analyze it, understand it, and up to a point be comfortable with it. So this is the main challenge here, which is very different to the situation in which we are trying to force the connection between two separate contexts, right? This is a very different challenge. We need to make engineers comfortable with dealing with ethical issues that they are able to recognize. They acknowledge it every day on their work, but perhaps they don't have the tools to actually engage with these issues. So what we really need to do is to make engineers comfortable with dealing with ethics, discussing ethical problems, finding solutions to ethical problems, which most of the time are technical solutions. So they are not stepping into another dimension when they are trying to, discussing ethical issues and finding solutions to minimize harm and maximize benefits. They are doing engineering. That's the main point, right? Of course, one thing is to say this, which sounds very reasonable and easy to get. Another thing at all is to find the ways to actually do that. And it's hard work. I don't like the term soft skill. We were talking about this before, because it gives you the idea that hard skills are, a thing, and soft skill is something that you can do when you have some spare time in the evening, when you don't want to watch TV. Okay, I'm reading some philosophy. That's not the point. I mean, what we are trying to do here, integrating engineering and ethics, is hard. It's terribly hard. You need to convince people to get out of their comfort zone, learning new languages, learning new argumentative skills, learning new reasoning skills, and try to do that with some confidence also, with enough confidence to perhaps go to their bosses and say, we think that this is a problem that the company should address. So you see that you need a lot of confidence to do that. And this is the result, and getting there is terribly difficult. But I think that this is work that we need to do right now. We are doing it up to a point here at the Politecnico. We are trying to teaching ethics to students, and this is a very good start. There's a lot to do.
Thank you. I catch up your suggestion, so forgot the scheme into hard skill and soft skill. We should talk about science and technical skills and humanities topics, humanities skill. Pavel, in your opinion, why it's so important to link, to create a link between these different, until us, different, until now, different words?
Yes, so I very much agree with the previous speakers, how cozy it is to be in this situation, but to entertain you a little bit in this part of the day, I'd like to zoom out a little bit and reflect on this topic of digital maturity as such. If we talk about maturity, then we also acknowledge that there was a phase of pregnancy, infancy, childhood, adolescence, coming of age, and adulthood, at least desire for maturity. And I think this is a bit, we have like 30, 40 years of digital revolution, evolution, depending how you look at it. So it's this parallel to human life, I think is very appropriate, because it's the time we are maybe in midlife crisis. Or at least certain realizations of the things we've been through, certain reflection, maybe indeed maturing, hopefully not too much, because we do have to stay playful and experimental and take some risks. But it's, I guess, this moment of reflection. And this is the stage we are in. And we need to embrace it. And I also want to add that there's nothing like digital maturity. There's just maturity. human maturity. So this is these components that were mentioned, different, bodies of knowledge. Of course, this ethical compass, but of course knowledge, but also emotional intelligence. Anything that is important needs to be, let's say, designers, creative technologists need to be very well equipped and understand the complexity of the world we are in, to indeed reflect on innovation from the environmental perspective or from the ethical perspective and so forth. It is demanding, it is not easy, but very much needed, because also that is what makes innovation sustainable, durable, and meaningful. So that would be my opening words.
Thank you. Professor Arcagni, the essence of your previous talk was technology needs humans, and humans are technology. So what does it mean in the two different perspectives from experience and the role as yours? What does it mean in terms of teaching to students to have a different mindset, to understand technologies and humans' impact of technologies, and what does it mean for students to have a double face of these topics, of these challenges and this problem? I mean, only a few years ago it seemed impossible to compare and combine computer science, artificial intelligence, and other emerging technologies with, as you mentioned, philosophy, sociology, anthropology. It's happened?
Yeah. Before me, you say something like an hard integration between humanistic and technology, but we have to remember that once we are integrated the humanistic and the technical plan, so now we have to find a way to reintegrate, not a new integration. Ethics, for example, is always considered and help to understand after something, but technology is a humanistic dimension. The best answer to these issues for me was given by other two philosophers, Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari, in their book titled "What is Philosophy?" I read. Translation is mine, so blame on me for any mistakes. I read, science, but it's the same for technology. Science has no need of philosophy for its task. On the other hand, when an object is scientifically constructed with functions, for example, a geometric space, it remains to look for the philosophical concept that is absolutely not given in the function. This is the point, in my opinion. The core of technology is concepts, and philosophy is the science of the concepts. So philosophy represents the most important approach to technology. We can approach technology studying its function and uses, like a manual to use instruments or to do instruments, or applying the practice. And it is very important. But if we want to know the concept of technology and its way to describe, shape, and use the world, both the physical one and the thinking plan, we need philosophy. In our Western philosophy, we have a lot of thinkers in this direction. I think in 20th century and in 19th century, Martin Heidegger or Friedrich Nietzsche, and before them Leibniz, not by chance considered the father of digital philosophy by mathematicians like Gregory Chaitin, Ed Frankins, rather than by Stephen Wolfram. Leibniz described a philosophy of science as a metaphysics. But metaphysics, according to philosopher Federico Campagna, is the place where we decided what reality is. The place where we use technology, language, apparatus of thinking, instruments. All of these are technology. And this is metaphysics. For Campagna, technique is a cosmogony of our world, where cosmogony is the act to bring order to chaos. So is science, and more than science. So we use a humanistic approach because we realize that the humanistic approach is the only exhaustive approach to study and understand technology as a cosmogony and so a metaphysics.
Thank you, Professor Arcagni. Fabio, as mentioned by Professor Arcagni, philosophy is the science of concept, and translating this into the technology development or the use of technology to solve problems, as we saw this morning. How can students or managers address the new way to understand philosophy and ethics into technology? I mean into technology because many times in the mass media, of course, I'm a journalist, sometimes in the mass media we talk about ethics of artificial intelligence, ethics of emerging technologies, but probably is the right translation of the challenges, because is the ethics, the human ethics into technology, the human philosophy into technology. So how can you address these challenges with the engineers and to solve which kind of problem?
Well, thank you. This is a super complicated question. I mean, there is awareness that it's time to do that. There are some methodologies out there, but it's really complicated to, move from the theoretical level to the practical level. So to start doing actual work to integrate these two dimensions, philosophical and ethical. Of course, there's much interest in integrating the ethical part because of, pressure from society and so on, but also the philosophical attitude has a role to play here. So I would like to answer your question starting with students and then trying to say something about the companies as well. For students, I think that the only way we have to start doing this work is teaching. So taking time to teach something about the history of ethics to engineers, but not just the history of ethics actually. What we need to teach is, what we need to show is that concepts and methodologies that come from the ethics dimension are useful to design technologies, design technologies that will be accepted by society, to design technologies that minimize harms and maximize benefits. This is an important point that I want to stress. We think of ethics most of the time as a constraint, right? As a very boring set of principles that tell us what we shouldn't do and leave us with no indications whatsoever to what we should do, right? But that's not actually the point. Ethics has a positive dimension that tells you, tries to convince you to take some directions, to develop a technology in that way and not in the other way, because there are ethical benefits to gather, right? So that's very important. And the only way we have to do this is in my opinion, in class. So we need to teach ethics, we need to exercise ethical thinking with students coming from the engineering field and show them that this might be a way to address issues that they will have to address, whether they like it or not. The company dimension is much more complicated. because there are more interests at stake, and it is much more difficult, to align these interests with a discourse about ethics, values, social well-being, and so on. But there is the possibility to do that. What we need to do is to take time to reason in companies on this. So to create the opportunities for employees, for people that work in the company to actually exercise their moral judgment. And I mean, time is always lacking, so this is a huge challenge. But I think that this is the first step that we need to do in order to do some actual on-field work in the ethics of technology.
Thank you, Fabio. Pawel, I saw your speech during last year during a TED conference. I suggest to you to search on YouTube and to follow the Pawel speech, because it was very, very interesting, because you address a specific topic. You suggest to see the relationship between technology and society in terms of design processing, and you suggest to combine ethics into design processing. It was very interesting because I know when I think to design processes, I think topics like ergonomics, efficiency, user experience. Ethic is not a topic that I thought when I think on the design processing. And you evidence the importance of introduction the ethics into design processes to be sure we humans remain in control of the technology that we use daily. Can you explain your point of view?
Yeah, so I have a background in human-computer interaction, user experience design, and such. And I'm also an educator or educationalist. So obviously, yeah, I do see the necessity to include, classes of ethics into design studies of different kind, not just related to digital aspects. Why is it important? We already have quite an experience, I would say, in user experience design as understood by, ergonomics, user friendliness, efficiency, productivity, and all these things you've mentioned. But, it's a kind of set of values that, just they are not unimportant for business, for industry, but it's just one layer of what we, I guess, need to focus on. Because these values were, I would say, more concerned about form and function, design, but maybe too less, for my taste, in content and context. And and I'm not even talking about problems that technology creates, with, I don't know, bias in artificial intelligence or, threats to data privacy and carbon footprint and whatnot. But I like to always give simple examples related also to, I would say, relating the digital maturity to human life. So, for instance, if you take something like dating apps, that's also the example I like to often talk about. It's in fact a very simple invention. There is not so much of rocket science involved. I do classes with students. We program something like that in one day. But the impact this simple piece of technology has on society, culture, generation is just so huge, which I would say has not been considered in the very design process. What are the side effects? What are the issues potentially coming from that? Simply that reflection, I would say, as I feel it or as I understood it, is lacking often. And so I advocate, that's quite a radical statement, I advocate to train designers in such a way that they should, have some sleepless nights and feel the moral dilemma in whatever they produce in order to stay connected mentally and be truly responsible for the decisions, design specific decisions they make, even on the level of, swiping something left or right. Maybe they don't create just a functional user interface, but they create breakups and divorces. Difficult to acknowledge this type of power, but yet design technology has this enormous power on our life, and therefore the ethical compass, or at least to some extent, I know it's difficult to play God, reflect on morality all the time. It's also a difficult position to be in, and who I am also to tell what would be ethical or not. But still, some level of responsibility, at least acknowledging what any innovation can do for good and for bad is very important. I think that reflection often is not there in our educational programs, on even higher educational level. Somehow, again referring to the lifetime, maybe even more happens in, I don't know, secondary schools, in the education, in the humanities, reading literature, reflecting on morals, Somehow, when we get into this so-called hard science, maybe that somehow often goes a little bit in the background. We are supposed to know, but we don't know. We need to constantly reflect on these issues. And I would say take responsibility, be a bit serious, not too much, but to some extent to achieve this state of digital maturity.
Interesting. Pawel, I stay with you one question. As educator, how do you teach, train, and educate your student to understand ethics and how to combine ethics with design or technologies process development? It's not so simple to understand how, so how you challenge this phase.
Yes, so I depart from, I leave the human-centered design, because human-centered can mean good or evil. Humans, we have two sides. So I'd like to talk about humane technology with an E, because it's some form of, there is a larger emphasis on the good and empathetic and considerate approach to design and technology. And of course, some students would follow me in this or not, but I'm try to turn myself into some kind of preacher that doesn't know everything, but at least ask the right question in any design processes. What are the social, cultural, personal, implications of any design decisions, even on the level of coding something or just sketching, making wireframes for some website. I tend to ask students about the morality of design. Let's put it that way. And it sounds spiritual, or it sounds driven by this good or bad, and I'm not too. I would say I'm also ironic about it, and I like to take distance to these principles. But at least it helps in an educational setting to ask where are we today in in human condition, how to design in these times, in post-human times also to large extent. So that's also what the role of the humanities are. We are shifting to post-humanities because we look at the human and human invention from the perspective of environment or technological automata. What does that mean? Do we co-design then with these agents? How to do that? How to give a voice in a design process to environment? It's not easy. So these are the type of questions I like to bring, and so far it works in my educational practice.
Thank you. I'm asking to all of our speakers, and so the last question is for all of you, some suggestions to the students, because this morning we saw in different point of view, in different mindset of our speakers, the 4 pillars of the digital creativity for digital maturity. And in this framework, in this approach, there are 4 different pillars, and we suggest to the students that are following following us today, 3 different mindset: cognitive, so analytical capabilities, the strategic vision to understand and to view the future scenarios, to understand the changes, and also the ability to work in a cross-functional team, maturing also the technical skills, and especially looking to the emerging technologies and the digital innovation. So, Professor Arcagni, I come to you. What is your suggestion for the students that are following us today?
Put philosophy in the center. Put philosophy in the center and think philosophy as a technological discipline. I know it seems too hard, it seems something insane, but if you think the method of modern science comes from philosophy. Descartes, Leibniz, Giordano Bruno, Leonardo da Vinci are all philosophers before Politecnico. So put philosophy in the center, because I afraid that sometimes we are in a place like you know, the famous series, American series, The Big Bang Theory. I hide the level of the discussion, sorry. But in an episode, someone asked to the protagonists that are scientists after an experiment, but why did you do that? And they say, because we can. And this is, for me, is pure terror. Because science sometimes, or technology sometimes, is something like that. I can do it, so I do it. Ethics is a way of thinking. Philosophy is a way of thinking, after doing things. So put philosophy in the center and think philosophy as a technological discipline.
Thank you, Fabio. Your point of view, capitalizing your experience. You are so young, so you can translate into practical suggestion to your students, colleagues.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, maybe an invitation. And the invitation is to consider engineering as an opportunity for social activism. This was not the case. This hadn't been the case for a very long time, but now it's clear that this is actually. So future engineers will contribute to shape society. And while doing this, they will have a say on what values are going to be predominant in our social life, and which values will, in a sense, suffer and become less relevant. So this is very important. My invitation is to understand that engineers will have to play this role, and so people must be ready. Students must be ready to take on this responsibility. And the second suggestion is a very quick one. Take as many ethics classes as you can, because they're really fun.
Wow, thank you, thank you. The new generation will save all of us. Pawel, your suggestions?
Yeah, I think a lot has been said also previously, but yeah, I do believe that design ethics is actually a new design, new discipline of design, a new methodology of design, as you. And there's also this saying that design is too important to leave it only to designers. So basically, multidisciplinary take on things is highly important. Design environmentalist, design philosopher, design ethicist, and so forth. This is how I see, the so-called creative industry evolving. where more and more humanities or post-humanities, critical post-humanities enter the discourse. And I think if we do that in academia, we are on a good way to digital maturity.
Wow, thank you. So the next role in companies probably will be the philosopher of the technical designer. So this is the the new way for students. So thank you so much. Thank you, Professor Arcagni. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Fabio. Thank you, Pawel. We take a few minutes, of course, to sanitize the microphones. Have you questions? Yeah, of course.
Thank you very much for this great speech. I'm doing a PhD in design here at Politecnico, and I'm trying to understand how to support designers in designing self-tracking wearables. So all the wearables like fitness trackers or headband for meditation that transfer all this biometric data in graphs at the moment. And now I'm dealing with ethics because it's inevitable to deal with it. And I'm trying to wear this kind of devices also to understand myself what kind of ethical questions arise in me while interacting with these devices. But I have this possibility because these devices are already in the marketplace. I can afford to buy them. How can we support designers in anticipating mediations that are not possible to investigate with actual devices? And the second consideration was what Verbeek talks, Peter Paul Verbeek talks about designers like practical ethicists, and it really made me think of my future role as designers after the PhD. So I would like to have your suggestion on this. Thank you.
I think, of course, a lot depends on the environment in which these questions are being asked. I can, you know, I live and work in the Netherlands, for instance. We have a lot of room for research in design and design ethics and experiments. There's like governmental funding going into that, so it's public money that is, you know. So of course this is another space where we can ask these questions, reflect on even things that are on the market and how they can be used differently. Or I don't know, cannot say much about the industrial you know, framework or a very much applied situation. I guess there might be other constraints or issues or problems for the young designers or so to, you know, suddenly ask big questions about, you know, once you're, you know, in a production process or development process, maybe you, it's difficult. So that, of course, a lot depends on the culture within the company or within the industry, whether, you know, someone on the production line of a certain process can still ask these questions. I don't know if that answers your question, but maybe Fabio will help me with the answer.
Thank you. No, I mean, thank you for sharing this very intriguing research. Maybe just answering the part about experimentation, and in the case when we can't do experimentation, how can we actually foresee the social and ethical impacts, right? I mean, there are some methodologies out there that focus on design. So not on the assessment of the product once the product has been developed, but at the very first stages of design, like value-sensitive design. Value-sensitive design is a methodology that has been around for some time right now, and the point is precisely to try and foresee these impacts. Try to understand which values are relevant, starting from the technology, the specific technology that we are developing, try to understand which values are relevant, and try to anticipate scenarios in which the way in which the technology is designed and these values come into conflict. Of course, there's only so much you can do at the very first stages of design, so there is uncertainty uncertainty there, a lot of uncertainty, severe uncertainty in the sense that you won't be able to foresee all possible scenarios and situations, but it is a very good way to start. And secondly, it is a very good way to work together. I mean, value-sensitive design is a methodology that is specifically designed for interdisciplinary research. So it is based on cooperation between philosophers, social scientists, engineers, designers, industry representatives, and so on. It is a very inclusive methodology, and I think that this is a very good place to start.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much to all our speakers. Few minutes to sanitize the microphone and seats. We start with the last roundtable at 4 p.m. Another question? No, it's not fine. Finish this roundtable.
I was going to ask a question that maybe you already answered. My question was that whether could we get to a point in the near future where artificial intelligence will help teaching people how to be more humane and ethical. I think you answered it partially, where maybe it's already happening, maybe it's not artificial intelligence, maybe it's something else, but that could be a different way of looking at artificial intelligence, not something against human, which is going to replace it, but it's going to be enhancing. I don't know, just curious. Thank you.
Can I say a couple of words? Well, thank you for the observation. Yeah, I totally agree with the way you answered your question. I mean, we must not expect artificial intelligence to solve our ethical problems. We have ethical problems, and artificial intelligence might be a tool to help us to see what the possibilities are. But in the end, we are the ones that choose. And this kind of choice cannot be delegated. It is pointless to delegate this choice to something else, because you have to recognize the choice. So in the end, it's your choice. Even if something else is telling you what to do, you are the one that are accepting or not accepting the choice, right? So artificial intelligence might be a very useful tool to analyze ethical situations, but in the end, responsibility is with us. And there's nothing we can do about it. Yeah.
Short, I anticipate the future for ethical assistance. It's kind of already happening, you know, your screen time on your phone. Oh yeah, you spend 8 hours per day. Maybe it's better you talk to your family or friends. You know, so this is certain implementation of AI or other, you know, sort of parameters measuring and sort of notifying you. And I think we are heading to that type of future, because this moral, ethical compass, a lot of people struggle with that. You know, we shifted to another era, I would say, where maybe this classic education, you know, that I had, for instance, still in my upbringing with literature, you know, I think now people, I don't know, like, I think this digital literacy or so replaced other type of literacy, so probably there should be some there will be some conclusion on morals that will be extracted from our conversations and sort of other ways of reading and writing. So Shakespeare and Dostoevsky on your phone will tell you at some point what you should do, maybe, or what you could consider doing, because as you're right, the decision is ours.
Thank you. Any questions? Are you sure? Can I declare concluded this roundtable? Are you sure? Okay, we have a special topic with the one of the speaker of the next roundtable. We focusing the ethics implication in artificial intelligence. So stay with us. Thank you again. Thank you, Professor Arcagni. Thank you to our speakers.
Thank you.
Few minutes and 4 p.m. here.